and this is what they're waiting for. An appearance on the balcony of Buckingham Palace, which has seen so many royal and national occasions in the past.
There is a moment in every great royal story where a single object carries more weight than words ever could. A crown, a letter, a ring, and sometimes a tiara. But not just any tiara. One that sat in a vault for nearly 2 decades, heavy with grief, legacy, and the memory of a woman the world never stopped loving. On the 18th of March, 2026, the British royal family hosted a state banquet at Windsor Castle for the President of Nigeria. The Great Hall glittered with chandeliers, diplomats, and centuries of protocol. And then Kate, the Princess of Wales, walked in. She wore a stunning gown. But the room's attention moved immediately upward. Because sitting atop her head, catching every beam of light in that magnificent hall, was the Cambridge lover's knot tiara. Diana's tiara. And according to multiple royal insiders and commentators who have spoken to outlets including the Daily Mail, Hello magazine, and royal correspondent Richard Eden, Queen Camilla was reportedly left in tears. Let that sit for a moment. A tiara made a queen cry. If you think that sounds dramatic, wait until you understand the full story. Because this is not simply a fashion choice. This is not palace gossip dressed up as news. This is a story about identity, grief, legacy, power, and the very complicated business of being a woman inside the British monarchy. And by the time we are done, you will never look at royal jewelry the same way again. Before we get into the emotions, the politics, and the tears, we need to talk about the Cambridge lover's knot tiara itself. Because this is not just a beautiful piece of jewelry. It is one of the most historically layered objects in the entire British royal collection. The tiara was created in 1913 by the Royal Jeweller House of Gerrard, commissioned by Queen Mary, the grandmother of the late Queen Elizabeth II. Queen Mary based the design on a headpiece that had belonged to her own grandmother, Princess Augusta of Hesse, making this a deeply personal reproduction of a family treasure. But here is where it gets even more fascinating. To create this tiara, Queen Mary did not simply purchase new materials. She melted down another tiara from her own collection, the Ladies of England tiara, sacrificing one piece of history to preserve another. That is how much this design meant to her. The result is extraordinary. The tiara features 19 diamond arches connected by lovers' knot bows, with 19 drop pearls, baroque and pear-shaped, hanging beneath each arch like frozen teardrops. It is simultaneously delicate and commanding. Intimate and monumental. Jeweler Stephen Stone, who has spoken to outlets including The Mirror and The Sun, has estimated its current value at approximately $135 million, though many experts suggest the true figure may be considerably higher given the emotional and historical associations that now surround it. It is, in every sense, priceless. Queen Elizabeth II inherited the tiara after Queen Mary's death in 1953, and wore it herself several times during the 1950s before gradually gravitating toward other pieces in the royal collection. The lover's knot then spent years in storage, waiting, as royal historian Marlene Koenig has noted in her writings on the monarchy, for the right head, the right moment, the right story. When we talk about Princess Diana and the Cambridge lover's knot tiara, we are talking about something that transcended fashion almost immediately. Queen Elizabeth II lent the tiara to Diana as part of the royal collection she could access as Princess of Wales. Diana first wore it in 1981 and continued wearing it throughout the 1980s and into the 1990s. It became, over time, her most recognizable tiara. The one that photographers chased. The one that appeared on magazine covers across the globe. But the relationship Diana had with this tiara was complicated in ways that feel almost symbolic in retrospect. The tiara is heavy. Not metaphorically. Literally heavy. The diamond arches and baroque pearls place considerable weight on the head, and Diana reportedly suffered headaches after wearing it. Multiple royal biographers, including Andrew Morton in his landmark work Diana, Her True Story, have noted that Diana's physical discomfort while wearing the lover's knot was well documented among palace staff and her close circle. And yet she wore it again. And again. Because she understood, with the instincts of someone who had mastered the art of royal communication, that this tiara spoke on her behalf. When Diana walked into a room wearing the lover's knot, she commanded attention not just with beauty but with history. It connected her to Queen Mary, to generations of royal women, to the legitimate lineage of the Princess of Wales title. In a palace where she sometimes felt isolated and unsupported, That tiara was armor. It was also, ultimately, something that could be taken away. When Charles and Diana's marriage collapsed and their divorce was finalized in 1996, Diana was required to return the tiara to the royal collection. It had been lent to her as Princess of Wales. When she ceased to hold that title, the tiara ceased to be hers. Royal commentators, including Ingrid Seward, editor-in-chief of Majesty magazine, have written about the painful bureaucratic reality of Diana's situation after the divorce. She could keep personal gifts. She could not keep official loans. And the Cambridge Lovers Knot, for all its emotional significance, was an official royal loan. There is something remarkably haunting about the years between Diana's death in August 1997 and the tiara's reappearance in 2015. The palace, as an institution, has always been better at ceremony than at grief. It knows how to arrange a state funeral. It knows how to continue. What it has historically been less skilled at is sitting with loss, particularly the kind of loss that arrives tangled up with public adoration and uncomfortable institutional truths. Diana's death shook the monarchy in ways that reverberate to this day. The initial response from Buckingham Palace, the perceived coldness, the delay in returning to London, the refusal to fly the flag at half-staff, these decisions were viewed by large portions of the British public as an unforgivable emotional failure. As historian Ben Pimlett wrote in The Queen, published by HarperCollins, the days following Diana's death represented one of the most significant crises of legitimacy the modern monarchy had faced. Against that backdrop, what do you do with a tiara that the entire world associates with a woman you are still, institutionally, figuring out how to grieve? You put it in a vault. You wait. You hope, perhaps, that the world's memory will soften, that Diana will become a historical figure rather than a present wound, that the day will come when someone can wear that tiara without the room falling silent. To understand why Kate's reappearance at the Nigerian state banquet on March 18, 2026, carrying the Lovers Knot tiara on her head, felt so charged, you need to understand what the preceding 2 years had been. In January 2024, Kate underwent abdominal surgery. The palace was initially vague about the reasons. Then, in March 2024, Kate released a personal video message in which she disclosed that she had been diagnosed with cancer. She did not specify the type, citing her family's desire for privacy, particularly regarding her 3 children. She spoke with quiet courage and evident vulnerability. She said she was in the early stages of preventive chemotherapy and asked for time and space as she worked toward recovery. The world, to its considerable credit, largely gave her that. What followed was a year of near-total absence from royal duties. The woman who had become one of the most photographed members of the royal family, who had worn the Lovers Knot 15 times, who had become the public face of a modernizing monarchy, simply disappeared from the gilded rooms and state banquets that had defined her public life. Her recovery happened, as it should, in private. She made a few careful returns. Trooping the color in June 2024. Wimbledon. The D-Day commemorations. Each appearance was measured, considered, and clearly made at her own pace. But the great formal occasions, the state banquets with their tiaras and white gloves and centuries of protocol, those remained beyond reach for most of 2024. The December 2024 Qatar state visit was notable for a different reason. Kate attended, but without a tiara, without an evening gown. She appeared in a daytime outfit, present but not yet fully returned to the full ceremonial weight of her role. Royal commentators, including Jenny Bond, who has covered the monarchy for the BBC for decades, noted at the time that Kate's attendance itself was the message. She was still there, still fighting, still committed. But she was not yet ready, or perhaps not yet well enough, to carry everything the role demanded. And then came July 8, 2025. A state banquet at Windsor Castle for French President Emmanuel Macron. Kate walked in wearing a caped red dress designed by Sarah Burton for Givenchy, the same design house responsible for her 2011 wedding dress, and the Cambridge Lovers Knot tiara blazing above her. The room gasped. There are multiple accounts of this moment from guests and royal reporters present, all describing the same thing, an audible, collective intake of breath. She was back. Not just back in the building, but back in the full regalia of her position. Back in Diana's tiara. Back as the Princess of Wales in every sense, ceremonial, symbolic, and deeply human. She was a cancer survivor reclaiming her crown in the most literal way imaginable. If you wanted to write a screenplay about a woman reasserting herself after the greatest physical and emotional challenge of her life, you could not script a more powerful image. The question worth asking is the one that royal commentators and historians keep circling back to. Kate has access to some of the most magnificent jewelry in human history. The royal collection is extraordinary in its depth, its variety, and its historical significance. She has worn 5 tiaras in her tenure as a royal. She has debuted pieces that had not been publicly seen in decades, including the Oriental Circlet at a German state banquet in December 2025, a piece featuring approximately 2,600 diamonds in an Indian-inspired design that had not been worn publicly for 20 years. And yet she returns, again and again, to the lover's knot. She has now worn it 15 times. No other tiara comes close in frequency. The simple explanation is that it suits her. Former royal dresser Angela Kelly, who served Queen Elizabeth II for decades and wrote about the mechanics of royal dressing in her memoir The Other Side of the Coin, has discussed how tiara selection is never purely aesthetic. There are considerations of weight, of how a piece sits with a particular hairdo, of how it photographs, of how it reads in a room. By all accounts, the lover's knot suits Kate's height, her bone structure, and her tendency toward classic, restrained elegance. It was, as former royal butler Grant Harold has noted in interviews with Hello magazine, simply a good match. But Harold has also said, and this matters considerably, that the choice goes deeper than aesthetics. When Kate wears the Cambridge lover's knot, she is doing something that reaches beyond fashion coordination. She is keeping a memory alive inside a marriage, and inside an institution, that carries that memory as both gift and burden. Prince William lost his mother when he was 15 years old. He has spoken in rare, careful interviews, including a mental health documentary he made with his brother Harry in 2017, about the lasting weight of that loss. He has described putting his grief in a box for years, suppressing it, and the cost of that suppression on his well-being. Kate wears the tiara for him. Not only for him, but partly, significantly, for him. When William sees his wife at a state banquet wearing the tiara his mother made iconic, something passes between them that no camera can fully capture. A recognition. A memorial. A shared holding of someone who is not in the room but is never entirely absent from it either. Kate never met Diana. Diana died in August 1997, when Kate was 15, the same age William was when he lost her. Kate has said in recorded remarks that she believes Diana would have been a wonderful grandmother to George, Charlotte, and Louis, and has described missing her in terms that are personal rather than diplomatic, genuine rather than performed. The engagement ring Kate wears every day belonged to Diana. She has said publicly that she did not need to resize it, that it fit her perfectly, and that this felt meaningful to her. Now we arrive at the part of this story that royal social media has been processing loudly and with considerable emotion since March 2026. To understand Camilla's reportedly tearful response to Kate wearing the lover's knot at the Nigerian state banquet, you need to understand not just who Camilla is now, but who she has been in the public imagination for 30 years. Camilla Parker Bowles, now Queen Camilla, has had one of the most publicly difficult rehabilitation arcs in modern British history. Her relationship with Prince Charles, conducted while he was married to Diana, made her one of the most reviled public figures in Britain during the 1990s. Diana's famous remark in her 1995 Panorama interview with Martin Bashir, in which she described the marriage as crowded with 3 people, crystallized the public narrative in a way that proved essentially immovable. Diana died. The public canonized her. And Camilla was left carrying the weight of that public verdict for years. She and Charles married in April 2005. The public's acceptance of her was slow, hard-won, and never complete. When Charles became king in September 2022, following the death of Queen Elizabeth II, Camilla became queen consort, later queen. She has thrown herself into charitable work and public duties with evident commitment. She has championed literacy causes, worked extensively on issues of domestic violence through charities including the Safe Lives organization, and has, according to multiple commentators including the historian Robert Lacey, done considerable work to demonstrate that she is a serious, committed participant in royal public life. And still, the shadow falls. Every time Kate wears the lover's knot tiara, the internet floods with side-by-side photographs. Diana on the left. Kate on the right. The same tiara. The same lineage. The same office of Princess of Wales. The comments are celebratory, warm, and almost universally framed around Diana's continuing presence and relevance. Within that frame, Camilla is frequently cast as the antagonist of a story that has never changed its essential structure. At the Nigerian state banquet, Camilla wore the late Queen's Belgian sapphire tiara, along with Cartier bracelets from the Queen Mother's collection and a diamond serpent necklace that belonged to her grandmother, Sonia Keppel. She looked magnificent. She had made her own thoughtful, historically resonant choices. And none of it generated anything close to the reaction provoked by Kate walking in wearing Diana's tiara. Multiple royal sources speaking to outlets including the Daily Mail and the Times have described Camilla as having been moved to tears in the aftermath of the evening. The reports are consistent in their description. Not a public display, not a dramatic scene, but a private emotional response to a situation she has navigated, with varying degrees of grace and pain, for decades. To be clear about what these reports represent and what they do not, there is no confirmed account from Camilla herself, nor from anyone in her immediate circle, of exactly what she felt or said. Royal sourcing of this nature always requires careful reading. What we can say with greater confidence is that the dynamic these reports describe is real, documented across years of coverage, and rooted in circumstances that are genuinely painful regardless of how one assigns moral weight to the history. Camilla is queen. She has earned that position through years of commitment and rehabilitation. And yet she exists in permanent proximity to the ghost of a woman the public never stopped grieving. That is not a comfortable position for any human being to occupy, regardless of the specific choices that created it. There is a broader story here about what tiaras actually do inside an institution like the British monarchy, and it is worth sitting with for a moment. The monarchy operates in significant part through visual language. It has always done so. The crown is the most obvious example, a physical object that has no practical function but carries extraordinary symbolic weight. The robes, the uniforms, the specific orders of precedence at ceremonial events, all of these are part of a grammar of visual communication that stretches back centuries. Royal scholars including David Carnadine, whose work on the invention of royal tradition is considered foundational in the field, have argued that much of what we perceive as ancient royal ceremony is actually relatively recent construction, crafted and refined to produce specific emotional and political effects. Tiaras fit within this grammar. They are not simply pretty accessories worn to formal dinners. They communicate continuity, legitimacy, memory, and aspiration. When Kate wears the Oriental circlet, a piece with strong associations with the Victorian era and with international outreach, she is making a statement about a monarchy that sees itself as modern and globally engaged. When she wears the lover's knot, she is making a statement about memory, continuity, and the specific emotional inheritance of the Wales line. Former royal butler Grant Harold has been quoted in multiple outlets saying that Kate understands the William and Kate monarchy will be different from the Elizabethan era, that it will need to be modern, and that her fashion choices consistently reflect that understanding. The lover's knot, in this reading, is not a backward-looking choice at all. It is the choice of a woman who understands that the future of the monarchy she will one day lead must carry its past honestly rather than pretending it never happened. Diana is not a wound to be hidden. She is a part of the story. The monarchy that Charles and Camilla are stewards of, and that William and Kate will inherit, cannot thrive by erasing her. It can only thrive by integrating her memory with honesty and grace. Kate seems to understand this with unusual clarity. Every time she chooses the lover's knot, she is demonstrating a kind of emotional intelligence about the institution she inhabits that is, when you look at it carefully, genuinely remarkable. There is one more dimension to this story that deserves its own space. Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis are growing up in a world where their grandmother Diana is a global icon, a figure of enduring fascination and love, someone they will encounter constantly in books, documentaries, photographs, and public conversations for the rest of their lives. And yet they never met her. She died 4 years before William and Kate even began dating. Kate has spoken about this with evident feeling. In documented interviews and charity appearances, she has described wanting her children to feel connected to Diana despite having no personal memory of her. She has curated that connection carefully and deliberately. The engagement ring. The tiara. The charitable work that echoes Diana's own passionate advocacy for the vulnerable and the overlooked. Royal commentators including Katie Nicholl, who has written extensively about the Wales family and has spoken about these dynamics in interviews with Vanity Fair and the Mail, have noted that Kate's approach to Diana's memory is one of the most quietly significant things she has done in her tenure as a royal. She is not performing grief. She is transmitting love across a gap that cannot otherwise be bridged. When Charlotte or George one day see photographs of their mother at the Nigerian state banquet, wearing the same tiara that framed their grandmother's face at events decades ago, that is not a fashion moment. That is a family inheritance being kept alive through the most intentional act of jewelry selection imaginable. What the Cambridge Lovers Not Tiara does, ultimately, is act as a mirror. It reflects back to whoever is looking at it something of what they bring to it. For those who loved Diana, it is a reminder that she is not forgotten, that the woman who wore it before Kate left a mark too deep and too genuine to fade. For those who follow Kate's journey, it is a symbol of survival and return, a woman who faced cancer and came back wearing a crown. For Prince William, it is a private language between him and his wife, a way of saying that he is seen, that his grief is acknowledged, that his mother matters inside the marriage as well as outside it. For Camilla, it is reportedly a source of pain, a constant reminder of the story she can never fully rewrite. And for the monarchy itself, it is perhaps a lesson. Institutions that try to suppress their complicated histories do not heal. They calcify. The vault that held this tiara for nearly 20 years was not protecting anyone. It was simply deferring an inevitable reckoning with what the tiara meant, who wore it first, and why that mattered. Kate took the tiara out of the vault. She wore it with full awareness of its weight, emotional and physical. She wore it through a cancer diagnosis and a long recovery. She wore it on Mother's Day in Britain and at a state banquet for Nigeria and at a French diplomatic reception and at a dozen formal occasions across more than a decade. She wore it because it is beautiful and because it is hers and because it was Diana's and because wearing it is one of the most honest things she can do inside an institution that has not always been celebrated for its honesty. The world noticed. Social media erupted. Camilla reportedly wept. And the tiara sat atop Kate's head, catching the light, 19 Baroque pearls hanging like frozen tears, as it has for more than a century, waiting for the next chapter of the story it has been asked to carry. Some objects hold more history than their materials can account for. The Cambridge Lovers Not Tiara, 113 years old, created by melting down one treasure to preserve another, worn by queens and a princess and a survivor, is one of those objects.